And originally they were called Gnostics. Generally, we today call them the Gnostics. And the Gnostics were the true Christians who came from the teachings of Christ, who was called a Nazarene. And it said that after Jesus died, Paul became the ringleader of the Nazarenes. It says that in the book of Acts. They were the sect of the Nazarenes, or the cult of the Nazarenes. Jesus didn't call his people Christians. They became known as Christians later on in Antioch. That was later on. But in the beginning, they had different names. In Jerusalem, they were called Ebionites, which in the Bible, it's translated poor, the poor. And that's why Paul said he wanted to give an offering to the poor in Jerusalem, because he was talking about the Christians there called the Ebionites, or the Gnostic believers there. And the Essenes was another group. Their leader was John the Baptist. Now, after Christ died, the brother of the Lord James became the leader of the Ebionites in Jerusalem. And Paul became the leader of the group up in Antioch and Damascus. That's why it says that Paul went into Damascus for 3 years. And at the end of those 3 years, he heard words that it was unlawful to speak, because he was initiated into the mysteries, into the desert of Damascus. Because they had a tradition where they would spend 2 years, and they would give everything they owned to the community. At the end of 2 years, they would have to make a decision. And if they decided to go ahead and join, they spent 1 more year. And at that point, at the end of the 2 years, everything they owned could never be given back. It was final. And so that last 1 year, they learned the deeper mysteries. At the end of that 3rd year, they would have knowledge that they were not allowed to speak openly or in public, but they were only allowed to teach in parables, because it was such great wisdom that they couldn't give their pearls before the swine, because Jesus said they would just turn around and rend them and trample the pearl under their foot. And so you see, many of the things that they taught in parables. And it wasn't lawful to actually speak because of various reasons. One of the reasons was because that information was forbidden by the governments. Right? Rome didn't want you telling people how to live forever, or how to live longer, or what to eat, or any of these things. They didn't like knowledge, so they would murder you. So that's why you had to wait for 3 years. They had to know if you were worthy of these teachings. So the point here is that Jesus and the apostles, John the Baptist, and these early Christians were Gnostics, and they came and stemmed from the Essenes and the Ebionites and the Therapeutae. And I've done videos about this, lots and lots of videos. Many of you have gone through those. And as you know, these individuals are said to be vegetarians. Well, how does that match up with this? Was Jesus a vegetarian? Was John the Baptist a vegetarian? Well, in order to get the view that Jesus was a vegetarian, people have to do a little switcheroony here and there. You see, it's not that simple to just say, oh, well, let's go back and we'll read a little excerpt from Josephus that says they were vegetarians, and that's good enough. Or let's read in the book of the Clementine Homilies, where it says that all the disciples were vegetarians, and that's good enough. Well, you might by now realize that when people read stuff, they sometimes read into the verses what they want to believe. I mean, I can show you scriptures in the Bible that we have right now in your own hands, in your own Bible, where it talks about people in the latter days will be going out and getting and eating meat and being gluttonous and so forth. You can read it both ways. If you look in the Greek, you can make that out to mean that people are going out and they're eating this meat. I can show you in the book of Peter where it sounds like he's against people eating meat. I can show you where the Apostle Paul seems to indicate that it's all right. But really, friends, it's not that simple. When Jesus was on the earth, he said to the disciples and the Pharisees and everybody standing there, you've got to drink my blood in order to be saved, in order to have life within you. And there he was making a reference to the Jewish sacrifices, because one of the most important laws in the Old Testament was this: you will not eat any of the blood or any of the fat. That part of the sacrifice is where the life of the animal was. And this God Jehovah, he did not want them to have that life. And remember, Jehovah kept these people running around in the wilderness for 40 years, just so they could not go into the land of promise. He did not want them to go in and have it easy. See, they all died in the wilderness. He ran Adam and Eve out of the garden because he didn't want them to eat from the tree of life. He did not want them to have life. But as soon as Adam and Eve sinned, Jehovah ran over there and killed an animal and clothed them. And he says, this is going to be your covering because you're naked. You don't have immortality. You're going to die. And so I'm going to clothe you in this physical realm, in this world. And I, the ego, and I, the God that is jealous and full of wrath, I am going to rule over you, and you're going to be slaves. And he says, the blood has the life, and I don't want you ever to eat the blood. And if you're in the field and you kill an animal, even there, you need to pour the blood out on the ground. Now, when you're making offerings, you can put, like Moses put half of the blood in some bowls, and the other half he poured on the altar. And it says he just splashed and tossed the blood all over the people, splashed blood on the mercy seat, in different places in the sanctuary, because it says in the Bible that without the shedding of blood, no forgiveness takes place. You see, something happened where Adam and Eve did not have immortality within themselves, and they had to get life from without themselves. And so this God Jehovah provided a way for you to have temporary life. You partook of the offerings that were made. You were allowed to eat this animal life, and the life that was in the animal would be sprinkled upon you. And so it was granted by this God that you could partake of this earthly life so that you could continue your mortal existence by sharing in this food, not the eternal fruit that was in the garden, that was in the first chapter of Genesis, that our Father gave us so we could live forever. But no, we fell, and now we're partaking of this carnal flesh, which is why we live in a carnal world. But the life that is in the blood, it was shed, and it was put upon the altar, and it made atonement for us, okay? Because of doing that, we were allowed to cover ourselves and eat the flesh. We were not allowed to eat the blood, but we were only allowed to share in the festival by eating from the parts of the animal that we were given. We were allowed to eat parts of that animal and have some kind of carnal existence. But when Jesus came to the earth, he overturned the tables, the money changers. And so a lot of people think it has something to do with money. Now, it may very well have. I'm sure that upset him, that they were, having this banking system going on, right? Where they were profiting from this. But if you look at the word there in the Greek, that they translate a den of thieves or robbers, sounds like something, has to do with money. If you look that word up in the Greek, it has to do with the word violence. It's a den of violence. And so the violence that Jesus was upset about wasn't the violence of thievery, but the violence of murdering all of these animals. It had become a great ceremony where thousands of people would come to Jerusalem and they would murder all these animals. Jesus didn't like the murder of all of these animals. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, you see, they almost stoned him for that. But if that wasn't bad enough, Jesus stood up in front of all of the Pharisees and said, now you must drink my blood and eat my flesh, or there is no life in you. And granted, that is symbolic. Jesus did not want us to drink his own blood. When Jesus died on that cross, his blood ran down into the earth. We didn't drink his real blood. The point is that no one was ever allowed to drink blood. Under the Jewish law, it was forbidden. It was the worst thing you could do. Even in the book of Acts, in chapter 15, all the apostles in Jerusalem got together and they decided that you should continue to abstain from blood because blood was so sacred. The life was in the blood, and it was the life that made atonement for your soul. And Jesus was saying not only that my blood was going to atone for your sins, but he was saying that you need to drink it. See, never before had they ever done that. The blood was given to God, and we were allowed to share in the offering, but we were never allowed to drink the blood. It was sprinkled on us. That's it. You never were allowed to drink it. It was blasphemy. It was the worst thing. It was a law that had been made from the very beginning. From Genesis chapter 9 onward, God had said you must never eat the blood. So this is something that was blasphemy, because Jesus was basically saying, number one, his blood would give us life. And number two, remember, it was Jehovah that slaughtered that animal in the garden and covered Adam and Eve. And it was the entire Jewish system of things that was built up around the offering of these animals to Jehovah. And the fact that only Jehovah would receive the blood and no one else, you were forbidden. And for Jesus to say, I am now going to be giving you life. In other words, I am now going to be the one giving you life. Me, not just my own blood's going to give you life, but I have the power to give you life. I've come down from heaven. I am the bread of life. You're going to eat me. This was blasphemy. So what was Jesus really saying? Well, that's something that I'm not going to answer in this video. I'm going to do a third video because there's so much to cover. So I'm going to keep you in suspense so you'll watch the third video that's going to be coming. Because this is deep. I don't know how many videos we're going to do. But there is something very important about what Jesus said there. There's something very important about that Last Supper that Jesus said that this means my body and this means my blood. And we've got to completely and totally, absolutely figure this out, because this is the crux of how we're going to gain life. And, you know, it's obvious that already we did not realize that under the Jewish system, there's things about that we didn't know. We didn't really understand why this prohibition of blood was there. And now we understand. It's the life that was in the blood that would be transferred to mankind, but only temporarily, because Jehovah didn't want us to live forever. And so there's something in there that I want to cover in depth. But for right now, I want to go back to these Essenes, because everybody says that these Essenes were vegetarians. But you have to understand, the only way you can do that is you've got to ignore the fact that Jesus gave the disciples fish. And you've got to say, well, that doesn't really mean that. Or that John the Baptist was eating locusts. Well, that doesn't really mean that. He was vegetarian. Well, why does Josephus say that the Essenes were vegetarian? Because, as I've said in many of my videos, they were Nazarenes. Nazarenes made a vow that they would never touch a dead carcass, anything dead. They didn't eat meat, and they didn't drink wine. But you see, these vows only lasted for periods of time. And the Apostle Paul explains that they did that along with being celibate for periods of time so they could pray and get closer to our Father in heaven. These were certain vows of celibacy and vows to abstain from things. You see, it got to be very, very difficult for people, because for those people who did not want to participate in the Jewish system of things, because the Essenes did not believe in the Jewish law, they were Nazarenes. They refused to partake of the sacrifices because the sacrifices were being made to Jehovah. And they didn't want anything to do with that. They abstained from it, and they literally made a vow. Remember, the Nazarenes go all the way back to Samson and Samuel and David, and they did not worship at Jerusalem, but they worshiped a place called Bethel. That means the house of El, and not the house of Jehovah. And so all the prophets were from the school of the prophets, and that was set up by Elijah. And of course he had students. John the Baptist had disciples or students, and Jesus had disciples or students. So Jesus was in the long tradition of Samuel the prophet, who was a Nazarene. That's why Jesus was called the Nazarene. And they were not to eat wine or touch dead meat. But you see, it doesn't mean that vegetarianism is the right diet. It means that they were abstaining from that Jewish law, from that religious system where you were basically protesting the sacrifices of Jehovah and that Jewish religion. If you'll read in the book of Acts, the Apostle Paul took upon himself the Nazarite vow. In fact, it says he was the ringleader of the Nazarenes. However, Paul goes to Jerusalem and makes a vow, a Nazarite vow, but it is obvious when you read that he had not been under that vow all of his life. In fact, he was a member of the Essenes. He'd already been a baptized member. He went to Damascus for 3 years and received this initiation. But when he went to Jerusalem, James, the leader of the Ebionites there in Jerusalem, wanted him to take the Nazirite vow. Well, he was already a Nazarene. But you see, Nazarenes took the vow ever so often. They weren't always abstaining from meat. They only did it for periods of time so they could pray. They weren't always celibate. They only did it for periods of time so that they could pray. Sometimes it only lasted a week or so. There were a few people who did it all of their lives, and they literally gave their lives, because it's not healthy to never eat meat. It had nothing to do with health. It had to do with the fact that they did not want anything to do with the Jewish system of things. So they went out into the wilderness and they prayed. But the fact that John the Baptist did eat locusts proves that he didn't always abstain from everything. And neither did Jesus, because Jesus gave his disciples fish. And Jesus brought a new thing, because you see, the Essenes before him didn't have all of the truth. But the mysteries that were being taught by the apostles are something that they did not fully grasp before Jesus came. Jesus brought the truth, and that's why he gave the disciples fish. So just because Jesus came out from the Nazarenes and was raised and was taught by the Nazarenes doesn't mean that he, like other Nazarenes, would have taken the vow for their entire lives. Being a vegetarian is something you can do for extended periods of time, for discipline and for prayer and for learning. You see, Jesus talked about fasting, but you have to accept what the Apostle Paul explains. He says that many of the Christians in his day were all vegetarians. Paul says that is the past. Many of these Christians believe in baptism. He says that I'm glad I didn't baptize any of you, because then you'd be following me. See, this is a new thing. Christ has brought a new thing, and I'm trying to explain to you. Even the Essenes, even John the Baptist didn't know all of this. So Paul was saying, listen, it doesn't do you any good to be a vegetarian. Paul says, don't worry about eating foods that are sold in the market because you think, I can't eat that because it was offered in some sacrifice to some god. He says, don't worry about that. He says, if you have faith, then all things are clean. Jesus cleansed everything. You don't have to worry about that. Jesus brought the truth, and he explained that that's all symbolic. So the Apostle Paul says, I wouldn't eat meat or drink wine ever again if it was going to stumble somebody. However, those who are weak in faith are the ones who eat vegetables and only vegetables. So the Apostle Paul said that has nothing to do with our spiritual self. That is only to do with meats and drinks and legal requirements that led up to Christ. Once Christ came, now we've got the reality, and we put all that behind us. Those are shadows and types. So what you have to understand is that Jesus brought a new understanding that we need to have life. Before, this God Jehovah didn't want them to have life. And so they had to abstain from all of that. And they got so ceremonial with all of this. They had millions of people coming up, slaughtering all these animals. Jesus didn't like any of that. He didn't like that system. But Jesus did give his disciples fish. And so I think Jesus really meant that that's the diet that we should have. Because as I said, in Ezekiel chapter 46, it tells us that for 1,000 years, mankind will eat fish. And I think that's why we have these oceans. It has all of this amazing amount of fish, and that has all of this tremendous tons and tons of fish. And in Alaska and in all the rivers, you've got all these salmon. And there's plenty of this food for all of us. And I think if we start eating this food, we'll find out that we're going to live longer. But I'm going to cover this in depth in the third video. We're going to go into this scripturally and how this all plays out and what the Essenes really were doing. You see, Josephus said they ate vegetables, but it's only because they were abstaining from the Jewish political system. Just as Jesus did not approve of the Jewish system of sacrifices. He brought that system to an end. And yet he did give them fish. It's almost as if he was replacing the old animal sacrifices with the eating of fish. So that's what the Bible teaches. That's what the Apostle Paul teaches. But we're going to go into that in depth in the third video. But there's some other things that I want to tell you before. Okay, I want to go through this very, very scientifically. What is required for the physical body to thrive? What is required for the physical body to live? We've always believed that if a person could live 70 or 80 years, they were doing good. So why should we go to this particular type of diet over here when people are eating potato chips and candy bars and fast food and all these other things, and they're living 70 or 80 years? And these people were vegetarians, and they're living, what, 90 years? What's the difference? It doesn't make a difference. And there's no guarantee of that. There are vegetarians that get hit by a car or fall off a cliff or get cancer, even though they've been a vegetarian most of their lives. You see, they've done lots of studies, and vegetarians don't necessarily live longer. And if they do, it is a misnomer to say it is because they're vegetarian, because it's not. We're going to prove very, very clearly here that it's not, because basically vegetarians, because they're probably religious people, most vegetarians are either New Age kind of people or Seventh-day Adventists or something, and those people may be more disciplined, probably don't smoke or drink alcohol and that kind of thing. Maybe they don't eat a lot of sugar. This is the major reason why they're living a little longer. And they may be supplementing their diet with vitamin B12 or something. But I want to explain to you, let's just forget that for a moment. Let's just look at, because basically what I'm going to say to you is that we could live more than 80 years. There have been people that have lived 150 years recently. Now I know it's, our government wants you to believe that's not true because we can't prove it. Well, that's because birth certificates weren't around 150 years ago for most of these people, and so they cannot really even prove it, even though we do have records to kind of prove it, but the government usually, it's reported in some magazine like the Inquirer, but we never know if it's really true. But we do know that people can live beyond 100 years. Now, if you believe the Bible, people live to be hundreds and hundreds of years. Is it possible to live longer? Well, think about it this way. Let's say that you had a child and you fed that child only sugar. You never fed the child anything else but sugar. You know that that child might die very, very quickly, maybe only a few months, because the child would eventually run out of fuel. He wouldn't have any protein. If you never gave him milk, he wouldn't develop an immune system. There's bacteria in the mother's milk. If you never gave them protein or fats or anything like that, all you gave him was sugar, I don't know how long that child would live, but it wouldn't probably be 1 year. Now, let's say then that you gave, well, look at your car. If you put premium gas, have you ever noticed that you can go faster and it's got more power? But you can put regular gas in your car. And of course, some cars could probably start on even less octane than regular gas. But it might start sputtering and so forth. Maybe you put a little too much oil in the gas. It'll still run that way, and there'll be black smoke coming out the back. And then eventually the black smoke will clog up the spark plugs, and it'll get weaker and start misfiring, and then it'll quit. See? So why is it we can't grasp the fact that if we're not eating very well, that's the reason we're not living longer? You're starting to gunk up, number one. That's one thing. But there's more than that. That's all we think. We think, oh, well, that stuff gunks the whole system up. And then we start getting plaque, and maybe we get cancer, and that's the reason we die. Oh, it's more than that, friends. The reason you get cancer, one of the biggest reasons, is because you don't have the ability to divide your cells and burn energy efficiently and reproduce the cells. But it starts making miscalculations, and you create cells that aren't correct. The cells are dying. And this is because of the fact that we're not eating meat. And I'm going to show you this. There is nutrition that you cannot get from... I don't know why we're going on and on and on. You can look up Live Armstrong or whatever that thing on the internet to tell you what's healthy, or the best internet sites or whatever on what is good health. And invariably they tell you nothing but lies. Well, you can get a good diet from that's not true. And sometimes they'll admit a few things, but they don't tell you the truth. Now listen, there is at least, I don't know, maybe 20 or so things that I can think of that you cannot get from vegetables or fruit. You have to get from animal-based diet. We all know about some of them, like vitamin B12, so vegetarian supplement. But there's, they never tell you in these articles on the internet that there is a whole lot of stuff you're missing. Without these things, you cannot live very long. And this is why people only live 70 or 80 years. We can live a lot longer than that. People don't die of old age. No one's ever died of old age because your body doesn't age. If you looked at somebody who smokes, you'll see they have wrinkles and they look sick, and they get sick a lot. They're coughing, they're hunched over, their skin is different color. They don't look good. And they can look at themselves in the mirror and see they're aging more than other people who don't smoke. Now, would you call that aging? No, it's poisoning. So you look at older people and you see this big thing under their chin. That's from thyroid not working correctly. Your stomach, when you get that big paunch, that's because you're building up fat around inside your stomach. And could even perhaps be tumors in there that you don't even know about. But there's a lot of poison being stored in the fat. I mean, this could take hours to explain how the body, when it uses carbs, if you're not eating meat, but you're eating carbs and vegetables and fruits, how that goes into your body has to go through a whole different process to digest that, and burns that sugar very hot. You burn out real fast. The body uses insulin. It builds fat, and the fat stores all of the poisons that you're putting into your body to try and protect you. And so this is why the fat builds up in certain areas. But part of it is because of the thyroid gland and how it makes your body swell up, because your thyroid gland can be likened to maybe the spark plugs on your car. If they're not firing efficiently, then you're not burning the gas in your car, and you're starting to misfire and that kind of thing. Well, it's like your body. Your thyroid gland, see, these glands, they control everything from your pineal gland to your pituitary to your thyroid, all the way down to all of the glands and the kidneys, the liver, and all of these things have to function properly in order to live for a long time in a healthy way. And so if the thyroid gland is not functioning, then your metabolism is going to be very bad. You're going to gain weight. You're going to start aging. People who don't have a thyroid age very, very fast. So aging is not something that you just normally do. Aging is you dying because your glands are not functioning. Your thyroid is supposed to produce a hormone that is used to take the energy from your food to the places that your body needs it, and to take the proteins and all of the building blocks of life in your omega-3 acids, DHA, which is an omega-3 acid that you cannot get from vegetables. It's very crucial to building your body, your brain, your heart, your tissues. You cannot get it from vegetables. But you see, you wouldn't know that. And doctors say, oh, you're getting plenty of omega-3 from nuts or something else. But you don't get the DHA. And that is a significant type of nutrient, along with a whole bunch of other things, like, for instance, minerals. They're always saying that, well, these vegetables here have all these minerals. You're getting plenty of vitamin. You're getting lots of iron, right, from the carrot or from something like that. No. There's different kinds of iron and zinc and copper and selenium. The hemi-iron, which is the hemoglobin that is in your blood that helps your body build your proteins and build your body, you have to have bioavailable iron. You cannot use rocks. Vegetables do not have hemi-iron. And so when you are a vegetarian, your hemi-iron stores are very, very low. And that's significant. It's very important because you cannot build brain tissue, heart tissue, and muscle with the kind of iron that you get out of vegetables. You just can't do it. So let's go through the different kinds of things that I mean, let's just cover a few things off the top of my head that you cannot get from vegetables. All right, we've talked about B12. Yes, you could get B12 from eggs and milk, but a vegan then would not be able to get any B12 unless they supplemented their diet. You'll get better B12 by eating calf's liver, fish, salmon, that kind of thing. Another thing that most people have never heard of is creatine. You must have that because it's something that you have in your muscles to help your muscle function and to be healthy and to rebuild your muscle. It's a part of your structure to keep you alive. And it is not found in any vegetables or plant food. You cannot get this creatine. And they have done studies and have shown that people who are vegetarians get really low in their reserves of creatine, and it's not good for your health. Also, carnosine. This is another thing that's in your muscles that help build muscle and tissue that you must have. Vegetarians have a very low store of that, and they're not able to build muscle. And so they begin to get very weak and tired, and they don't live very long. At the point where you lose all of that, and not just that, all of these nutrients, as those nutrients begin to leave, you have a store of them maybe when you're little and you drink a lot of your mother's milk, or when you're little and you're drinking cereal and milk, and you get some of this stuff in the milk. But then you become a vegetarian or a vegan as you get older, and you start decreasing and you start losing these nutrients. And as you lose these nutrients, you die. That's why smoking kills you, because it makes your body get rid of the nutrients. Your body has to use them up to get rid of the poisons. So, as you lose these nutrients, the store within your body, you start to die. Now, if you lose one of them, you might live on for a little while. Your body might be able to bypass that and use something else, But as you lose several of these, you will just die. And this is why some people even die of cancer or some disease when they're very young. They may still be healthy looking. They're a full-grown young person. They don't look old, but they're dying of cancer because of some of these minerals that are missing. Some of these nutrients that are missing. So then you've got, as I said, DHA, which is a fatty, omega-3 fatty acid. Now, you can get omega-3 fatty acids in some plant foods, but you can't get some essential omega-3 fatty acids like DHA. You have to get that from animal-based diet, especially from foods like liver and fish. Also, D3. Now, people aren't familiar with this. They don't understand this. Nobody's ever taught this, because if they were taught this, people would want to eat meat. People wouldn't eat the cereal that they're feeding these children, and people would stop eating chips. They'd start eating more healthy because people want to live. People want to be happy. They want their diseases to go away. So if you educated people, people would know this, and then they wouldn't need the doctors. And they're making billions of dollars off the doctors. So vitamin D2, that comes from vegetables. So you see, I'm getting plenty of vitamin D. No, you're getting a kind of vitamin D, but it's not oil-based, and it's not animal-based, which is vitamin D3, which is what you need to rebuild your tissue and your muscle and your heart, and to reproduce your muscle. If you don't reproduce your muscle, then the cells aren't dividing correctly. They're missing essential nutrients, and therefore they begin to die or to rebuild themselves incorrectly. And this is cancer. You don't build the tissue around your arteries. You get heart disease. Your arteries can break, and you can have a stroke. In your brain, you can have a stroke in your brain because you don't eat these nutrients. You can have Alzheimer's eventually because your body's not rebuilding the brain tissue. Or you can have arthritis. See, they call this an autoimmune deficiency. Arthritis, well, it is. There are lots of reasons why you're going to have arthritis. The biggest reason why you have arthritis, or the pain that's involved with that, is because there's bone on bone. And the nerves are touching, and they're inflamed. The only reason that's happening is because you're not eating the fatty acids that's in meat. And not just any fatty acids. Like I said, you've got to have meat fat. Because DHA comes from only meat. The fatty acids, the omega 3 fatty acids called DHA comes only from meat. There's also taurine, which your body has to have. See, we're not taught that your body needs these. These are essential nutrients. All we're ever taught is vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin F. That's it. You know, and a couple of other, we hear the word phytochemical. We hear a couple of things. Recently, we're beginning to learn about these fatty acids, but they don't tell you that some of these fatty acids have got to come from meat, most of them, in order to rebuild your body. They don't tell you a lot of things. And they also tell you that you need minerals, but they never tell you that you need the minerals that come from meat, and I'll explain that in a minute. But taurine is something that your muscles need to rebuild and to be able to relax and for you to have peace and calm and to not have stress. And so if you have stress and you're smoking or you're in a lot of stress, you're going to be needing more of that. So you've got to eat the meat because it's not in vegetables. It is an essential nutrient. Now, talking about the minerals. You see, you can't just get minerals anywhere. Iron is in the ground. You could just go out and pick up some dirt, right? Put it in some water, stir it up, and drink that, and you'd get your minerals, right? No. You see, you've got to have bioavailable minerals. And specifically, when it comes to some minerals, it's got to be only minerals that come from meat. Now, I know you're going to read, if you go to the internet, you'll read that you can have regular iron and that'll work. But not as well. They'll say it's not as good. You've got to have, to really get good iron, you need meat iron. They call that hemi iron, or that's the hemoglobin in your blood that you know, helps rebuild your whole body. So they admit that you need hemi iron and that it's very important to have it. But they don't go on and really explain that it's literally essential, because they've done some studies. You'll play hard to try and find this on the internet to try and figure this out. But they've done studies where people eat lots of iron and they say, oh, sure, you've got lots of iron in your body. Everything's great. Pat you on the back, say you're doing well. But for some reason, this person's anemic, right? But yet they supposedly have all the iron they need. Well, that's because it's not the iron they need. It is not the hemi iron from meat, but it's the other kind of iron. Maybe they're taking iron supplements, so their iron levels are fine, but they're not getting better. It's because the doctors either don't know all of this information or very little of it, or they don't care. They're being told by the pharmaceutical companies and these big vitamin companies that are selling vitamins, right? They want you to buy vitamins. Vitamins don't really work. There may be a few vitamins out there, you know, maybe it says right on it, it's from animals, and maybe that could help. But you also need a whole food in order to get all this nutrition, because one thing works with another thing. Like I've said in many of my videos, calcium by itself is not going to help you. Even bioavailable calcium is not going to absorb into your system and do its job unless you've also got enough zinc and magnesium and vitamin D3 and all these other things, and phosphorus and sulfur. I've talked about the 7 minerals that your body must have, like essential right now. If you don't get them every day on a daily basis in large amounts, you'll die very quickly. And those 7 are potassium, phosphorus, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, zinc, and selenium. Those 7 are absolutely critical. Do you understand that most of your selenium and zinc and all of these things come from meat? Fish have a lot of selenium. You need copper also. It's very important to have copper in your diet, so we might even add that into the 7 and call it 8. But there's even more than 8. There's many of them that are very important. One is iodine. A good source of iodine is the sea, so kelp. So kelp can be a good source of iodine, and people are, you know, buying kelp and eating that. Well, all you got to do is eat fish. And it's also in your liver, and it's in meat. Iodine, we talked about the thyroid gland. Iodine is the primary thing that begins the whole process in your thyroid. And if you don't have sufficient stores of iodine, then your body's not going to work. So you go out and your doctor says your thyroid's not working. He's telling it, you know, doctors are telling everybody this, right? Oh, your thyroid's not working properly. Well, yeah, Your spark plugs aren't working properly. So what are you going to do? Do you somehow put more gas or hit the gas pedal a little bit harder? You know? Give your car some kind of a pill? No, what you need to do is find out why the spark plugs are getting all clogged up. Maybe you've got too much oil in the gasoline. You've got to eat the right foods. Now, if you don't get any iodine, that could be a problem. But it's not just the iodine. As I said before, it's a whole bunch of things that you need. It's a group of things that work together. And all of those things, you don't have to worry about what your body's doing. See, we're talking about this and explaining it scientifically. But we don't need to. All we need to do is do what nature provides. God had it all provided for us. It's all taken care of. You don't have to know how to breathe. Your body will breathe for you. Right? If you could figure out scientifically how many breaths you're supposed to take per second or per minute, and then you said, okay, I've noticed that I'm not breathing enough or something, or I'm breathing slow. So you start counting your breaths, and and so you try to control your breathing. It won't take you but just a minute or two, and you're going to be hyperventilating, and you're probably going to pass out. You cannot control your breathing. Your subconscious mind does that. And if you just relax, it'll take care of it for you. You don't have to worry about the nutrition in your food. You don't need to know about creatine and tyrosine. You don't need to know about DHA and hemo iron and the zinc from meat and the copper you get from the meat, the bioavailable minerals. You don't need to know about phosphorus and sulfur and how sulfur goes into your body and helps the body create a thing called glutathione, which is what your body uses 95% of the time to fight off free radicals and cancer. You see, you don't need a superfood from Brazil. You only need to eat meat and the sulfur and the eggs and in the meat and in the milk, along with the phosphorus and the calcium in the milk and the magnesium and the zinc and all of these things that are in animal-based foods, milk and eggs and meat. And when you get that calcium, that kind of calcium, it absorbs into your body, the bioavailable calcium that comes from milk and meat. But, you know, another substance that the body can use to fight off free radicals is vitamin C. You say, well, you've got to go get berries and fruit for that. Well, yeah, you get lots of vitamin C in berries, and there's nothing wrong with berries. We need to eat berries. They grow in the summertime, and the bears go out in the summer and they gorge themselves on berries because they're going to hibernate. And the body takes sugar and it produces fat. If you want to hibernate during the winter, it's good to eat a lot of berries. That's what that's for. People that live up there in Canada, they have lots of berries all over everything during the fall, and they gorge on that, and then the body gets prepared for winter. But you see, most people don't need to do that. And like I said, the body doesn't use vitamin C to fight off cancer. That's not its preferred way of doing it. It likes to use glutathione, which comes from sulfur, which comes from meat. But guess what? Vitamin C is also in liver, calf's liver and beef liver and fish. It's actually in there. So to get your vitamin C, right, you don't necessarily have to get vitamin C. So you see, you wouldn't necessarily need as much vitamin C as they say you need. But if you're not eating the proper foods, like you're not eating your liver and your salmon and your milk and eggs, and you're not eating these foods, then you're not going to produce the glutathione that your body needs. So in that case, they've had some success to get rid of cancer by eating peach pits or apple seeds, which has an antioxidant that can fight off free radicals. But you see, you don't have to do that. In fact, it's not the way the body prefers to fight off cancer. The body prefers to use meat to fight off cancer. In fact, meat provides more than just the antioxidant or the free radical fighter of vitamin C and resveratrol and those kinds of things. It has more than just that. It has a whole gamma of nutrition that your body needs to fight cancer. And remember, cancer is just a deficiency in all of these other nutrients that your body needs. So if you go and get a superfood from Brazil to fight cancer. Yes, you are fighting the free radicals and it might help you. And if for some reason you actually also happen to eat a good diet beginning at that point, you might actually get rid of the cancer. If you just eat peach pits or apple seeds or vitamin C or grape juice or whatever to get these free radical killers, to get this antioxidant into your system, it's not going to be enough. Because your body's dying for many reasons. You need the calcium, the phosphorus, the sulfur, all of this stuff. The potassium. And this comes, you get lots of potassium from any food that's called a food. These 7 minerals that I talk about, plus a lot of the trace minerals, all of those are all found in food. If you eat something that doesn't have any of that in it, then you're not eating a food. Meat has all of the phosphorus and potassium and sulfur and all of these other nutrients, especially the type of minerals that your body must have, bioavailable minerals. So they've not done a lot of studies on copper, but there's been some studies that have shown that the copper that you get from meat is far superior because, you know, they say you can get calcium from broccoli. But as I've said, broccoli is not very absorbable. Your body can't really absorb broccoli. It's cellulose. It doesn't break down very well. And unless the body can break it down, it can't really be absorbed into your body. So we could go into so many aspects of this. But it all boils down to eating the right foods and not worrying about anything else, but just eating the right foods and getting sunshine and being happy. Because the pineal gland and the pituitary gland on the top, in the center of your brain, are the most important things in your life to keep your body happy. Now, the pineal gland is excited by the eyes. And when the light comes into your eyes, it goes back through your optic nerves, hits the thalamus gland, and excites the pineal gland. So, basically what we're saying is you need to be in a good environment. If you were locked inside of a coffin in the total darkness, and there was a tube running in there, and it was feeding you all the nutrition you needed, but you didn't have sunlight, and you didn't get to walk and exercise, you'd still die very soon. The most important thing is the operation of your pineal gland. This controls every other organ and function in your body. And that is operated by your higher consciousness. You need to be able to imagine and dream and be happy. You cannot be happy if you're not in the right environment. So happiness and sunshine and going outside in the environment is the most important thing. Then you have your mouth, which takes in the nutrition. You have your eyes, which takes in light. That's above your mouth. You have your nose, which is below your eyes, which is smells and your feelings and emotions. And they've got to be good. You've got to feel good. And then you've got your mouth, which takes in the food. That is also very important because your body can't operate without the proper nutrients. And that's where the thyroid gland comes in. Your thyroid gland controls your aging and a lot of other things and all the other glands. And so it will control also your mood, just like your pituitary and your pineal gland controls your mood because it controls everything. But down the line, you get to your thyroid and it's got to function properly. So you've got to eat iodine, and that means you've got to eat lots of fish and meat. Not too many vegetables have a lot of iodine. You can get iodine from seaweed, but not too many of us are going around eating seaweed. Although you can get supplements, but if you want to eat things from a pill, fine. But I suggest you eat food, not just something from a pill, ground up powder in a pill and think that's good. I mean, that's going to help you. If you're unwilling to eat a good diet, then go ahead and buy your kelp. But I suggest you eat the fish that's in the sea and the liver and the meat that has the life in it already, that has all the other things that you need. Because kelp is not a great source of protein and all of the other things that we talked about, taurine and creatine and DHA and all these things that you've got to have. It doesn't have fatty acids. You've got to have a balanced diet. So kelp is great for one thing or another, but it's not good enough for your diet because you're a human being and you're supposed to eat a certain thing. So the thyroid starts with the minerals, but we got to go further. And see, we've got to break this down even further. Because remember, not only do you have to have all of these nutrients, but there are some other nutrients or substances, chemicals, that I'm going to call toxins that you must not have. So if you eat certain things and you say, well, it's got this and that in there and I need those things, but yet it's got these other things called toxins, you don't eat that. If I told you that you needed oil and you went and got some hydrogenated oil, that wouldn't work. Hydrogenated oil means it's been cooked and processed so that the molecular structure of that oil is a long chain link of molecules that your body cannot digest. And so therefore it turns into plaque in your arteries and you die, you get sick. And since it's doing that, it's building up all of this plaque, then by the same token, it's not using that oil that you put in your body. It's not using it to rebuild tissue. Your body needs oil. And you can eat palm oil, and you can eat coconut oil, and you can eat olive oil, and those are good for you. But you don't want it hydrogenated. You want to eat the food, the whole food. You don't want to mess with it and hydrogenate it. So one of the biggest reasons we're sick today is because we've been told not to eat fat, right? And therefore people are eating less meat. They're told, don't eat meat, that's bad for you. And they're said, okay, and so people say, yeah, you can eat fish, but, don't eat eggs because there's cholesterol in it. Don't eat anything that's got too much oil. Well, let me give you an example with this oil thing. For years, peanut butter, people ate it like it was going out of style, right? And they thought, well, this is good for you. It's just peanuts and oil. That's good. Well, a little salt, but nobody worried about that. The real reason that peanut butter wasn't good for you, and they never told you this, is that it was made from hydrogenated oil. So here you were eating a half jar of peanut butter, right, as a snack. And you don't realize you're just downing about a half a jar of hydrogenated oil, which is just plugging up your entire body with plaque and ruining and putting sludge all over your body. And so for years, you ate this along with everything else that had hydrogenated oil. Not just your peanut butter. The bread was made from hydrogenated oil. Everything, right? Oh, we don't want to use real oil. No animal fat. That's bad for you. Let's put the hydrogenated oil. That's what's killing you. So recently, some smart scientist or doctor exposed it, and now the peanut butter companies are saying, oh, well, here's the reason why we were doing it. Nobody wants to eat peanut butter if it doesn't spread well. Hydrogenated oil makes the peanut butter spread smooth, skippy smooth and creamy. So that's the only way that people would eat it. They tried making natural peanut butter for people. That was, you had to stir it, and it was really hard to stir it up, and nobody liked it. So people just ate their hydrogenated oil peanut butter, and it was making them sick, but they didn't know it. So recently they've come out with a new idea, and I don't know for sure how good this idea is, but it sounds good. They claim, if you look at a lot of peanut butters now, they're saying they're made with palm oil, not hydrogenated palm oil, just palm oil. They're saying that palm oil makes the peanut butter spread well without being hydrogenated. So friends, if you're buying peanut butter, make sure you get peanut butter made with palm oil, unless you're willing to go with the old-fashioned peanut butter that you got to stir yourself. But a lot of people don't like that. So if you want spreadable, good-looking, nice-tasting peanut butter, but you don't want to die, make sure you get the peanut butter that says made with palm oil. Usually when it says natural, I think Best Value, whatever it is, I think they have a brand, I usually buy it, that's made with palm oil. Skippy has a brand of it. I think most of them have a brand now made with palm oil. So, you see, that's just peanut butter. And it's like all the foods that we buy, they've been dumping this hydrogenated oil on us. For years, all we ate was margarine. Nobody ate butter. Same thing. Margarine will kill you. Go back to the butter. How about your milk? You say, oh, well, it's healthier to eat 2%. No, it's healthier to eat whole milk. You need that fat. If you're not eating meat, and then you say, oh, well, we also can't drink milk because that's also bad for you, and eggs is bad for you. So now you've got no source of any of these nutrients. You've got to have the DHA, which is the omega-3 acid that rebuilds your body. You've got to get that from an animal source. It does not come in vegetable source. So when you eat the fat goes into the intestine, and it triggers a response from the liver to send down bile, and then the body synthesizes hormones. So you see, this thyroid gland works in conjunction with your lower gut and the liver and the kidneys, and all of these glands and organs function to create life and to reproduce and rebuild your body and to give you well-being, happiness, and health. You cannot get that from vegetables, friends. You must eat animal products. Now, the best thing to eat is salmon, because remember, friends, it's also important, not just our own health, but it's also important that we make sure that the animals are safe. And the way they're torturing and murdering the animals today, and these places where they are slaughtering all the cows and the pigs and stuff like that, and I wouldn't eat the pigs. Remember, pigs eat bad, nasty things. Hence, the Bible says that a pig is unclean. And we still should understand that pigs are generally unclean. It's much, much better to eat organic, grass-fed cows, goats, or chickens, which is going to be hard for you to find that. But if you're going to eat meat, you need to eat grass-fed, organic cows and goats and things like that. But there's another caveat. Fish might be the best choice, except for one thing. Salmon is the best fish you can eat. It has more nutrition than just about anything on the planet, but here's the problem. A lot of the salmon that you're buying now is made in a salmon farm. So they're not wild caught. They're not natural. They're just genetically created in a pond somehow and spawned in some kind of farm, this fish farm. And they're saying that the vitamin nutrition levels are very low. They're not as high as the wild caught from Alaska in the wild rivers. So look around and start boycotting all of these fish farms and stuff like that, and get these companies to understand that we need to start eating the fish that's being caught from the rivers. Now, I know a lot of you are being told don't eat the fish from the rivers because Fukushima and all that stuff. Listen, friends. The rivers in Alaska are pure. Pure and as clean as a baby's butt. Those rivers purify themselves. Every couple of 100 yards, the river goes and falls through the rocks and the gravel, and it purifies itself. And those fish are pure. And I know some of the fish go out into the sea, but Mother Nature has cleaned that area up in Alaska. And this is proven that they've done research on these fish, and they found that the fish that is caught in the wild is much better for you. And so, listen, don't worry too much about all this hype that you shouldn't eat food from the wild. See, that's just propaganda, because they don't want you to think that you should go organic and eat the food that God provided. But they want you to believe that their food coming from these torture houses is somehow better, and it's not. So don't be fooled. Grow your own food if you can. Get organic, grass-fed cattle if you can. But eat meat or you're going to die, friends. At least, at the very least, eat salmon and milk and eggs. It's very important, friends. But anyway, I'm looking down at the time, and I'm going to have to close this video here. I'm going to try and do the third video as soon as I can. There is a lot more information. There is a lot. I may have to do 4. And there is definitely some information that we've got to go through in the New Testament to get this all square in our mind. We're going to have to compare it with the Old Testament and understand what all of these symbols mean, and why the Apostle Paul says that it doesn't matter whether you eat meat, and why other scriptures sound a little different. And we've got to understand what this is all about. It has to do with sacrificing foods to idols, friends. But it was not the prohibition of meat, and the earlier Christians were not vegetarians. But we're going to go into it in the next video. And I hope you guys have a really great day. This is David Bose. We'll see you again next time.